I know I sent this to you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the program today.
I don't know if she'll get it. It's on Dad's email.
David,
Yeah.
you want to go ahead and
Yeah, as we're admitting people, I'm going to start by introducing our guest, Rachel Katzman. I was just reminiscing with Rachel that my first recollection of working with her was when I was at the Jewish Federation, and Rachel was active on in working in Jefferson City on behalf of people with challenges and disabilities, and she was a fierceful advocate for those people. She's also been a strong advocate and supporter for Israel, but she's here today because about 7 years ago, she started Sweetly in St. Louis, and it's for that that we want to welcome her and thank all of you for joining us. Um, this is her expression of her love for food and her way of bringing people together. And I think all of us who enjoy hospitality and food can appreciate where she's coming from. She's the mother of 3 girls, and her husband and her daughters are her testers for all of the food that she's going to be talking about and that she sells through her organization and company. So Rachel, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you all for joining us today.
Hi. I can't, because this is on my phone so that you can all see what I'm doing, I can't see you because it won't let me. Should I be able to see people here? I can just see you, Stephen.
so you can change your view on your phone. Yeah, you can change your view.
Okay, now I can see.
Okay.
Okay, there you are. Okay, now I see people. Used to doing this on a computer. Okay, so do you want me to just go ahead and start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I just wanted to say hi. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'm welcoming you to this little presentation on cookies and how to ice cookies and frosting. So without further ado, I'm just going to get started here. First, I wanted to start by saying my cookie recipe that I use. Here's an example of one of the cookies. I'm going to use this in a little bit. I use a shortbread recipe, and it's actually the Barefoot Contessa shortbread recipe. I have tweaked it a little bit for my needs, but that's the basic recipe. Most people use sugar cookies. I happen to prefer the taste of a shortbread cookie, which is buttery and a little nutty tasting, and I just think it's got a better flavor. You can certainly do this with a sugar cookie roll. I roll out the dough and cut each cookie by hand. So anyway, that's the cookie. And then the kind of icing that we use to decorate a cookie, getting an example here, like this, you can see this, is something called royal icing. And royal icing is very basic. There are tons of recipes online for royal icing. I use sort of I think it's a little more sophisticated. It's a combination of a glaze and a royal icing. It just works better and it keeps the bite of the cookie soft. I don't know if you've ever had one of these, maybe in the grocery store that's been sitting around for a day or two and you bite into it. The cookie's good, but the frosting's hard. Well, this recipe that I use, which I'll be happy to share, is a combination of glaze and royal icing. A couple of things that keep royal icing soft are corn syrup and glycerin. They will keep that bite nice and soft when you bite into the cookie. But royal icing is basically made of water, powdered sugar, meringue, and flavoring. You can flavor your royal icing with lemon extract, almond extract, vanilla. I use vanilla all the time just because it's pretty neutral and it gives the icing a really good flavor. The trick though with royal icing is the consistency. Royal icing is finicky, but yet it's very forgiving, and it's malleable. You can work it in different ways. Unlike buttercream, which you see on most cakes, buttercream is stiff. You can't put it on top of another. You can't put two colors on top of it and get something else. It doesn't allow you to really decorate like royal icing does. Some people do with buttercream, but it's just not as flexible as royal icing. So anytime you see like this kind of a decorated cookie, it's royal icing. And the royal icing, it hardens nicely where you can package it. Whereas like the buttercream would stick to the packaging. That's another problem because of the butter content. But this you can put in a bag and it will stay, the design will stay very nice. So without further ado, royal icing. I made a batch of royal icing right here, and I will show you. When you make it first, we start with icing that is very, very thick and fluffy, and then we add water to change the consistency. So here's an example of just a batch of royal icing that has been sort of just halfway. I've just used a little bit of it, but it's very thick. You can see I can turn it upside down. It's not even going to fall out. It's thick and fluffy. It almost has like a marshmallowy consistency. But I am going to have to, in order to work with it and put it on a cookie, like the one that I showed you. Where is this cookie? I can't put that thick frosting on this cookie. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to go to the edge or anything like that. So I've got to water it down, for lack of a better term. So in the cookie world, how do you know what is thin enough or thick enough for what you want to do? So we talk about royal icing by numbers. There's something called 10-second frosting, 15-second icing, 20 to 25-second icing. Those are probably the three most common numbers, if you will, that I could give you to work with. So what does that mean? What is 10-second icing? So what I do is, and I'll take a little sample here. I already have some mixed. So here is, this is too thick. Here's some 10-second royal icing. And you have to put a moist towel over this in order for the icing not to crust while you're working. So if I put some royal icing in a piping bag here, I'll have extra in my tub, but I don't want this to go bad when I run out to put it back in the bag. So I will cover it with a damp towel, which will keep it from getting that crust. Once it gets a crust, you can't use it, because then if you mix it up, it gets the little hard flakes in there and it won't go through this little piping tube. So you got to keep that covered, for one. So when we flood a cookie, when you put on that base coat, that first coat of frosting, like in this cookie, the pink background, that flood consistency is also called 10-second consistency. So you've got to thin out that thick frosting that I started with, like this. So I will put some in a dish here, right here. And then what I will do is literally add with a dropper, or just even with a spray bottle, I will add a drop of water to this, and then I will give it a stir. Okay, just stirring it up. And you can see I've already made this. It starts to get very thin, like so. Now, how do I know? What does that mean, 10-second frosting? So what I do is we take a knife, and what I'm going to do is I am going to slice the knife through the frosting. And in the time it takes that line to disappear, it will take 10 seconds. And I literally put the stop clock on my phone and I press that stopwatch, and at 10 seconds, if that line hasn't disappeared, it's too thick, and I'll add another drop of water. It takes very little liquid to go from one consistency to the next. So it doesn't take a lot at all. That's one of the things, there's a big learning curve with how to do this. And so one of the things when you first start is to use that timer and use the liquid to help you know if you have 10-second frosting, 15-second frosting. So I am going to flood a cookie for you and show you how to do that with this 10-second frosting. Just a very basic shape. Here, I'm going to just take this rectangle and start with, or actually, no, I'm actually going to do something else with a cookie. No, I'm going to do this. Sorry, I'm figuring out how to do this. Forgive me, this is the first time I've done this tutorial type of thing for people. So I'm going to take this rectangle and show you how to flood a cookie, which is the first thing you want to do sometimes when you even start to decorate a cookie, is get that base coat down. So, and I'm going to change the camera here so you can see what I'm doing. Let's hold that up. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I've got this piping bag here, and I'm going to just put a little down on the napkin to start. The first thing when you flood a cookie is you outline the cookie with the frosting. This is that 10-second frosting that you can do. And you don't have to wait for this to dry, okay? I'm gonna wait just a second because I'm gonna back up here as well. The 15-second frosting, which I don't have because it's in between the two, that one you can outline and flood, okay? Some people use an even thicker frosting to do the outline. You can do that. I prefer, because that's a lot of mixing of different colors and different consistencies. I like to use the one that you can do, that you can outline and you can flood at the same time. So I can use one consistency. This is that 10-second. So now I'm going to hold my tip pretty close to the cookie, and I'm just going to pressure. I'm really pressing down to get the icing out. It flows pretty evenly. And I'm just going to fill it in. Okay, there we go. Now, the next thing is I'm going to take this tool. It's called a scribe, but you can also use a toothpick if you don't have this little thing, which a lot of people don't when they first get started. But I'm going to take this and I'm just going to smooth the icing out on to the cookie here and fill in the, like so. Now I'm doing this pretty quickly just for time's sake. Okay. So there you go. Now I have some bubbles here. I don't know if you can even see those, but some air bubbles, and I'm just going to poke those out as I go through. Okay. And I have a little damp cloth next to me, which I'm wiping off that little thing, the little scribe that I'm using, just as I'm going through to make the cookie neat. Now you can see here on the edge, this icing for this cookie was probably too loose, okay? But I can correct that. So I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to swipe that off. And hopefully this will start, as it starts to dry and crust, it will keep its shape. But that is kind of a rookie mistake, is that the icing was too thin. So I would go back and I would thicken that up, pull this maybe to the edge a little bit more. So that's an example really quickly of how to just basically flood a cookie. Okay, I'm just going to stick this over here. I put all my cookies in front of a fan to dry. That's how you get sort of a puffy, very even texture to the cookie. You won't get any craters. You won't get any sort of places where the icing is more or less. So I'm going to set this here in front of my fan, and we're going to do another one. Bring that over here. Okay, pull that up. Okay. This next one, so that was the 10-second icing. That was a little loose actually to do like the flood in the outline altogether. This next one, I'm going to use 15-second frosting. So again, I have thickened this up. When I put that knife through the frosting, it disappears. It took 15 seconds. So I'm going to show you a cookie here. Oops, this is another thing. This is not coming through. Okay. And I'm going to show you here a technique that's called wet on wet. So I'm going to use actually 3 different colors here, all the same icing consistency to make a flower on a cookie. Okay. First, this is a coffee cup shape that I showed you earlier. And so first I'm going to start with the white. And I'm going to flood the top layer of the cup. Again, this icing is a little thin, but I think I can probably make it work. I'm not going to put as much on. I'm going to take my scribe. I'm going to sort of fill in the lines here, like so. You can see. Okay. Now I am going to wait until I do this next portion of the cookie right here. I'm going to skip that because I want to create an effect like this, where you see that line in between the 2 layers. In order to do that, the cookie is going to have to crust over. This is going to have to crust over before I can put on this next section. Okay. But I can go to, hold it up. I can go to the gray area and do that first. So I'm going to carefully pipe along the line or along the shape of the cookie here. And now I'm going to fill this in. I'm going to keep that tip close to the cookie so I get that puff texture. I'm going to go around the lines of the outside and fill it in. It's probably the least fun for cookiers is flooding a cookie. It's not that exciting and it can take a lot of time. And again, you don't want to fill in too much. I leave a little edge because I know I'm going to smooth it out and I'm going to pull the icing to the edge of the outline, toward the edge of that cookie. If I had put the icing all the way to the outline, it would, like in that first cookie, it overflowed and the icing was a bit thin. So this is with the 15-second frosting, and you can see it's a little thicker, and so it's not going to go over my edges. And you just pull it toward the outline. That outline creates sort of a border that keeps the icing from falling off the edge of the cookie. And again, I'm going to go through and smooth it out. If I see any air bubbles or if I didn't quite get it even, I'm going to smooth it. You can also take the cookie and pick it up. And I'm not very good at this, so I don't do it very often. And just tap it on the counter. We'll get rid of air bubbles and it will even out the icing there. So you can see, so you have a nice smooth surface. And I can see I have an air bubble there. It just disappeared. You have to do this while the icing's wet. Okay. So I'm going to add some flowers to this. And again, this is a very simple wet on wet technique. And I'm going to start with this orange. And again, it's the same, this is important. It's the same consistency as the gray. So you're going to see it's going to melt into the frosting, and it's going to melt into that flood layer. And I'm just going to do different shapes here because this is going to become a flower. You've got to work fast before that top layer crusts in order to get the flour to smooth evenly into that flooded layer. And a lot of times too, people actually sketch out their designs and their colors before they even start a cookie set. So I'm gonna do a circle here. Okay, so that's that. And I need to do the leaves. So I have a green color for the leaves here. Take some out of there first. And I'm just going to do this really quickly. Again, you have to work fast with a wet cookie so it doesn't crust. That bottom layer doesn't crust. That's the whole idea. And this will become something in a minute. But you can already start to see the amount of time that it takes just to do a single cookie. And so I have something that got in there. I'm just going to take that out and cover it up. And then last, I'm going to go back to the white. I'm going to put the center in some of these. And again, this is called wet on wet. There's tons of videos on how to do this on YouTube. If you want to go through this again. So now I have to wait. I'm going to put this down, and this is good. I'm going to have to wait the entire night, 24 hours for this to dry before I can do the next step. So I'm going to stick it over here in front of my fan and let that dry. Okay. I already have one done here, right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up the flowers, and I am going to use an edible marker, okay, which I have a lot of markers that you can write on the cookie. But again, you've got to wait 24 hours before you can do that. So I'm going to take my marker and I am going to outline this flower like so, do my design. And this is sort of whimsical. So there's not, I don't really have to stay within the lines because I wanted more of a whimsical look on this cookie. So I'm going to go through. If I didn't wait for this entire cookie to dry 24 hours, if I started to use the marker too soon, it would poke through the icing and I would have a mess. So you want to do this. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. The leaves. And again, this is just one technique, okay? And I'm not going to finish that because there's other things to do. But now I need to go back, and I'm also, because this sat for 24 hours, I waited to do that second layer. So when I pipe above, this is the tip, this is the top of that coffee cup. I want to create that nice line, that nice indentation line. It gives the cookie texture and depth and makes it look like the real lid of a to-go coffee cup. But in order to do that, again, I had to wait till that layer below it or above it, there's really no right order there, dried. And again, I'm just going to smooth out as I flood this cookie like so. Okay, and then I will wait. Where's my finished writing? Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'll wait for this to dry, finish that up. Again, this goes back in front of the fan right here. And then here's the finished product. When that dries, and after I've done all the flowers, I will go back and I will do the writing on there that says Mom Fuel. So you can sort of see the process for this one cookie. One cookie takes a while. So that's that one. What I wanted to do though is, I kind of feel like having done this for the first time, sort of maybe skipped a couple of things there. I'm gonna go, that was just one technique, one cookie. I'm gonna go back to the frosting or to the icing. I wanted to show you, to really start from the beginning with the piping bag, okay? This is a regular plastic piping bag, and it can be Wait, Andy, will you hand me a glass? How you fill a piping bag, how you get the icing in there, and what you have to do. Thank you. So once you get your icing to the right consistency, let me go back to this. This was this 15-second or the 10-second frosting that I used. First of all, when you let the icing set, I don't know if you can see that, there's a lot of air bubbles. You want to get rid of those air bubbles. You know, you can use the scribe, you can use a spoon to get rid of them. That's going to give you a smooth bottom coat of that smooth flooded layer. Okay. And I'm going to add some color to this. Cookiers use this, it's a gel color. A lot of people, you know, when you're first starting, like myself as well, we go to the grocery store and we get those food coloring colors. When it comes to cookies, what happens with those is if you use those, I'll call them cheaper, less quality colors or brands, what happens is your layers, the colors can bleed into each other, but with gel colors, that doesn't happen. So if you ever want to get serious or take your cooking to the next level, you want to get these gel colors, and it doesn't take much. It's just, as you'll see here, I'm going to put in just a drop. This is gold. You can see how little I have in there. And this is going to turn into a lovely gold yellow color here. You just stir it and see. And again, you have to add your coloring after you've made your icing thin and you've got it to the right consistency. Then you add the food coloring to change colors with your cookies. Okay. So I've got this lovely gold. Actually, we'll probably add a little bit more, but for time's sake, I'm just going to keep it here. And in order to get this into my piping bag, I'm going to have, this is called a coupler. Okay. In this little piece, you have these two things that come together. You buy these together, but I'm going to take this little O off, and I'm going to put this inside the piping bag down. Okay. Stick it in there like this, goes all the way to the bottom. It cannot go any further. Okay. And I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut off that tip, that little tail that's left over. This gets snipped. Okay. And then I'm going to take a icing tip. Now these tips come in different numbers. The Wilton company has a number on every icing tip, and every number creates a different shape. So this is a number 2, and it's probably the most common thing, the most common number or tip that we use for frosting cookies and really for flooding cookies. That baseline I just did was a number 2. Now I have a whole gamut here, you can see, of different numbered tips. They all do something different. If I want to create a leaf shape, or if I want to do writing, if I want to do writing, I need like a 0. This is a 0, 0. There's really, I haven't found any rhyme or reason to these numbers. And there are different brands of tips, but this is a very tiny, tiny tip. I don't even know if you can see it, very tiny. So this is what I would use for writing letters or numbers onto a cookie. Skinny, skinny tip and thick icing, 20 to 25 second icing to make those letters, because you want them to be stiff. And if they're if the icing's too thin or the tip is too thick, this tip is not the right number, you're gonna have a mess and it just spreads all over. Okay, so I'm gonna take my tip, it slides right on to that coupler. You can see it goes right on there. And then to hold it in place, I'm going to take that O and I'm going to screw it back onto until it can't go anymore, and it's connected. Very simple. And then to get it in there, it's really nothing fancy. I put this inside of a glass and I roll it down like so. And then I'm just going to, since this is a rather thin icing, I'm just going to pour it right into the bag with a spatula. It's gonna go right in, pretty easy, simple. And there it is. Got all out of there. And then I'm gonna take this part up. And I'm gonna press this down, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. And then I'm gonna turn this like so, twist it. And then I have these little clips. You can get these anywhere. You probably put them on other things you have at home. I just clip this so it keeps the icing as I'm squeezing from coming up the top. So it keeps it down there pretty well. I can just press it out. You can see then the icing's coming out and I can do whatever I want with it. So that's a pretty basic thing that, you know, you need to know how to get the icing into the bag there. I know I'm kind of jumping around here, forgive me. I wanted to go back to, and I wanted to show you a little thicker frosting. I wanted to finish this cookie. So I made this little cupcake cookie with the dots, but I want to put some texture. I want to do some lines up here. So I'm going to show you the difference. You saw the difference in the consistency in that very thin frosting. Well, this is a thicker frosting right here. Whoop, me. So it's not coming out. So I'm just going to change the tip on this, which is very easy. Put this on because that one was, and you can reuse these. These can sit overnight. If I don't finish an order, I can pick it up the next day. This icing stays good for many days. There's nothing in it that would spoil. Hey, Andy. So this is this 20 to 25 second icing, and it's much thicker. And you can see it creates a very thick, precise line that doesn't flood all over the place. Hold that up there. So I'm just going to like make the lines of that cupcake holder, and I'm just going to pipe up straight lines. And when you start cooking, that's probably the first thing you start with, is just making straight lines. Now you can see here where this line, it spread apart on me. The icing stopped coming out. So I'm just going to fill that in and then go on and go up. And again, but you notice how nice and precise these lines are here. It's not running all over the place. And this didn't connect. So I'm just going to go back and finish that up there and there. And then I'm going to take my scribe here and I'm just going to press this down so there's no tail on the end of that frosting line that I just made. The royal icing will flow into itself. Even at this thick state, you'll get a nice precise line most of the time about what you want, how you want things to look. But again, this is a thicker icing and it has a very thin tip. And also too, if you're just starting out, and some people do this as well, I could have, if I wasn't that confident in my line work of, you know, with no guide, just taking those lines straight up, I could have taken a pink edible marker and I could draw on the cookie if I wanted to with a straight edge, and I could draw a line straight up. And then I could use that as a guide and pipe over the line that I just made. Whoops. So you can use those markers, these markers, for many different things in the cookie world. And so there's, what are you doing? There you can see the cupcake, and I just finished it up with the lines. Now I did not have to wait for this entire layer on the bottom to dry first. Again, I could wait till it just crusted over and then go back. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you with that cookie we did earlier with the coffee cup cookie. So we've only waited a few seconds, maybe a couple minutes here, but I've already know that this is frosted over, this is crusted over that top layer with the white. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just fill that in. I waited to do it before just because I knew I had to wait for this other section. So I just waited until that was done before I did this. But if I wanted to, like I am now, I've waited and now I can go back and fill in this line again and flood this other section of the cookies. There. And you can see you have that nice indentation there that gives it some texture and makes it look more like an actual real to-go cup. And I'm going to set this down and put that right there. Must feel like I should ask if there's any questions. Also, yeah. I don't know how much more time we have, a few more minutes. I wanted to also talk about cookie cutters a little bit and cookie shapes. So I have this shape right here, which is this cookie cutter here, which is a cupcake, okay? But we do something in the cookie world called a cutter flip. So we, instead of getting millions and millions of cookie cutters and trying to store them, what I'll do is I took this same cutter and all I did was cut off the edges of it. And so what this is going to become is this is going to become a paw print. I was actually gonna show you how I can take a cupcake and turn this into something else. You can also, a lot of people can turn this over, and at Christmas time, this will become a Santa. So this will become the beard, and this will become the face, and then someone will, you can add like a triangle, and then you have the hat. But it's called a cutter flip. So when you're looking at your cookie cutters, move them around and see if you can reshape them without having to like buy, you know, I know I have a triangle. If I wanted to do a Santa, I know I have this, I can turn it upside down, add a triangle, and there I've avoided buying another cutter. So I'm gonna flip this. And again, when I cut this, where'd it go? I took off the edges here. I took off those sharp edges of the cupcake. I'm gonna turn this into a paw print. Just another little thing here. Andy Katzman. So I'm going to flood this again with my white as a base. And go around just the edge. And again, this takes practice. I'm going super fast just for time here. And again, pressing pretty hard and keeping the tip. This is that number 2 tip, keeping it close to the cookie and trying to just fill in as best I can, but not too much because I don't want it to flood over that outline. And again, I'm going to pull the frosting to the edge of the cookie. And keep pulling until you've filled in here. You can see that. And now if I put this cookie over to dry like it is, I've got like a dent here. I can see that already. So I'm just going to go ahead and even out my cookie. And even if need be, while it's wet, I can still add a little more frosting and then just spread this out. Take out those bubbles because they will dry and you'll have like a rough top. I'm going to smooth out this edge right here. And again, I can see these bubbles coming to the top, and that the bubbles come when you whip the icing, when you first make it. It's It's good to let the icing sit overnight. Then the bubbles come to the top and you can get rid of them quickly. This just takes more time. Okay. A few more. Now I am going to wait a second because this needs to just form a little bit of a crust. So I'm going to put this in front of the fan, and while that's drying for a second, I'm going to show you with a dry cookie here, okay? Since I'm a teacher by training, I keep wanting to stop and ask, is there any questions? But I know we're going to do questions at the end. So while that's crusting over for a second, I did want to share one other technique that we do. And I know this is a lot, and this is something that I did not do until later in my cookie life. And that is I started stenciling cookies. So it's another way. So I put polka dots on this, and that was that wet on wet technique. But let's say for whatever reason, I didn't want to do that. I could use a stencil of polka dots and also get the dots on that cookie as well. So this is something called a stencil genie, and it's 2 parts. And I'm going to put the stencil in between it. And there's magnets on the corner. So I will just snap it into place. Comes off, again, snaps into place like this. Andy Katzman. And then I'm going to lay this on top of the cookie. Right here, I'm gonna hold that up. Okay, and when you get advanced, this is an airbrush machine right here that I've got this pink thing. You can hear the little motor. I'm going to turn it down, and I'm going to add an airbrush color, which is different than a gel color. So you can't put this color into this machine. It'll get clogged. You need to buy separate colors to do this. So I'm just going to put a couple of squirts in there. I'm just going to do blue. This is very light. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I am going to carefully, this doesn't get all over the place, put these dots on this cookie with this airbrush machine. Airbrushing is a whole nother technique. And again, it takes time, and you know, to learn how to do this. I feel like everything has a learning curve with these cookies. So you start by taking your airbrush, a little bit comes out, and you have to keep that airbrush, and you'll see. So I want to keep this from going underneath the stencil. I'm going to want sharp dots. I'm just going to press down with this little tool. Press the stencil down. I'm going to go in at 90 degrees. Just going to gently fill in those dots on the cookie. Cookie is dry ice. The icing's totally dry. I know we're getting to the end here. I'm trying to cover all this as much as I can. Fill that in. You do this very lightly. And again, at 90 degrees, this comes down. And then carefully pull this stencil up. You have a fairly crisp, dotted cookie there. And again, you can use that for a background, and then I might put some words there or whatever the person wants. There's a, you know, I can go back and outline this and so on. So that's just another way to get like dots on a cookie. Just depends on what you're looking for, texture, colors, all kinds of different things. And it is messy too. So that's airbrushing a cookie. Thank you. But as you can see, each cookie, you know, there's a process involved, there's time involved, and there's a lot of, you know, different things that you can do with different things with each cookie. Okay, I think we have, do I have time to do one more thing? Show one more thing?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm going to show you one more thing. Again, it's involving a stencil. So I'm going to take this off because this is totally messy. And that is, I don't even have it. Actually, I'm going to use this same one. Give me one sec here. Sorry about that. Hold on. Tragedies happening over here with colors and things. Give me one sec. Just spilled this. Okay, another stencil. Gonna snap this into place. Okay, I am going to take another, this has to be fully dry. And this time I'm going to take this and I'm gonna put this on top of my cookie here. And I'm going to take some thick frosting, thick color here, which I didn't. Yes, I did. Here we go. I'm going to take this, and I have a scraper here, this little rubber scraper. I'm just going to put some on here. And Andy, can you hold this up? Almost done here. Okay. And again, I'm going to put this color, I'm going to put the stencil, these are squares, and I'm just going to scrape this along here. Scrape it till it's all off. Clean up these edges, which I didn't do such a great job on. But you get the idea. Actually, I can see that I can fix this. I'm just going to scrape that off. But you can see I have now another pattern of squares, and these are raised a little bit because I did the pattern, but I used the royal icing and I used that 20-second frosting. That's that consistency to get that onto the cookie. So again, just another technique. And then I'm going to let that dry. Okay, I know that is a lot, and I didn't even get to go back and finish up my paw print there, but I've run out of time, I think. So I need to, Judith, some questions.
There is a question from Margot, and she would like to know, would you share your icing recipe?
Yes, yes. Do you want me to just verbally?
So what we could do is, if you want to email it to me, like, just type it out really quick after the show, after the program today, and I can email it to everyone that's here today so that they can have that.
Yes, be happy to do that.
Okay,
be happy
great.
to. Yeah.
So do we have some additional questions? Boy, this was
yeah, I thought it was a lot. I was a little all over the place. I apologize for that. My first time here, but yeah, so I know it's lots of things of many years of doing this all in 45 minutes.
Well, so Judy, you have a question?
Yes, and I thought you did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
So your recipe may address this, but when you were talking about adding a little bit of water to change your consistency for the royal icing, are you talking about eyedrop fills of water? Yep. Or like a teaspoon?
No. This is like an eyedropper.
Okay.
Eyedropper. And then for some reason, if you've done it too thin, you can always add powdered sugar to thicken it up. So you can always correct. Believe me, there's a lot of times I've gotten good and I can just tell by mixing how thick I need it or not. I don't have to do the 10-second or 15-second timer anymore. But sometimes I overcorrect and I just throw in, a teaspoon at a time of powdered sugar to make it thicker.
And if your royal icing is on hold overnight until the next day's use, is it on the counter or in a refrigerator? You
can do either. If I know I'm going to go right back to it the next day, I keep it on the counter. If I know I'm not going to use it it can stay weeks in the refrigerator, and you can freeze it too, as well. When you first make that thick batch like this is, a super thick icing, you can freeze this. So a lot of us make batches of this and just throw it in the freezer and take it out as we need it.
Thank you.
Sure.
So when you thaw that out, you know, a lot of times when you thaw things out, there's excess water in whatever you've frozen. Is that the case in this as well?
No, so after I make it, I put a layer right up against the frosting. It touches the frosting of saran. And then I do that twice and then I put the lid on. So there is no, yeah, so that doesn't happen to keep the condensation from forming.
Great, great. We have a question. Mariah asked, what was the fancy blue cookie on the sheet?
Oh yeah, I didn't get to that. I was going to finish this up. So this was a hydrangea cookie that I made. And so this was quite a process. This was somebody wanted these for a wedding shower and she had an invitation of hydrangeas and she wanted blue and white. So I was going to finish up the leaves for you, but I ran out of time. But anyway, just to show you this cookie. So I first flooded the cookie in one color blue, and then I airbrushed. I have a hydrangea shaped stencil leaf. So I did the airbrushing underneath that. And then I took the same stencil and I went ahead and I used the royal icing where you just saw me where I brushed the pattern to give it a little more texture and more like the leaf of a hydrangea. Then I put that on. And then the very last thing, and I didn't get time to do it, is I went and did the leaf. But you can see I oversprayed on here, but it's not going to matter because I'm going to cover it up with green icing for that leaf, which would have gone right here. I just ran out of time. Oh, this cookie's soft. It's, you know. So that's what that is. And I did the same thing here with the white hydrangea. It's hard to see white on white. I used a silver airbrush color to give it some texture. So yeah, so that was that. Hydrangeas.
They're beautiful.
Thank
So,
you.
Another question
Yeah.
from Elise. What got you interested in starting this business?
So I started, and if you want, there's more on my website and whatever, but the Reader's Digest version is I started making these cookies, these shortbread cookies, and dipping them in chocolate and then drizzling them and using sanding sugar to make designs and sprinkles and things like that. And my family, I started bringing them to dinner on Sunday nights. And then my sister-in-law asked me if I would, she was working for, I can't remember the non-for-profit anymore. But anyway, she wanted some of these cookies to bring. And she said, oh, you have to make a card because people want to know where they can get these. And I said, okay. So I quickly put together something and nobody asked. Nothing happened, which was fine. But my cookies got into the hands of somebody who was very active in Friends of Wings, which is a children's cancer support group. And they started ordering tons of butterfly cookies, which is their insignia. And so that sort of put me over the top. And I've always loved to bake and cook while I'm home by myself. So that's what got me started.
And Shelley would like to know, actually, Maura would like to know, how thick do you roll the dough?
Good question. I roll my cookies are 1/8 of an inch thick, and that's sort of standard. It's either, I'm sorry, not 1/8, 1/4 of an inch, and then some people do, I believe, 3/4 of an inch. I don't do mine that thick. I go down a scotch. So mine, I believe, are a 1/4 of an inch thick. Yeah, and I have a rolling pin with the little things on the end here. I'll show you. I believe. See these little wheels on the sides of the rolling pin? Yeah. And so it keeps the dough nice and even as I'm rolling out. I don't have to guess. And these come off. So if I wanted to do a thicker cookie, and sometimes I do put cookies on a stick and I bake them with the stick in there. So I will make my cookie thicker for that. I'll go up to about to 3/4 of an inch. And these have, this little gadget has the, anybody's used this before. It actually has, yeah, this is a 1/4. It has the numbers right up there. So yeah, and I'll go up to 3/4 for a bigger cookie. But yeah, these are a 1/4.
So Shelley
I
would
actually,
like,
oh, I was gonna say, I increased mine to a thicker cookie one time and I got lots of complaints that the cookie was too thick and I don't know. So I went back to a 1/4 of an inch. Anyway.
they look delicious. I'll hope
you.
to have one someday. So someday soon I'll have to
Yeah.
visit and get some cookies. They're absolutely beautiful and look so delicious. Um, so also Shelley would like to know, when you give the recipe for the icing, would you also please give us the shortbread recipe?
Yes, and I will give that. Again, I use Ina Garten's shortbread recipe. I think it's in her party's cookbook. I'm not 100%, but I use that. I tweak it a little bit because in the cookie world, and I mean, we're sort of type A anal retentive people, perfectionists when we do these cookies, but cookies spread in the oven. So I've tweaked it to not get the cookie to spread by many different things. I refrigerate the dough before I start. I cut the dough, it refrigerates again, so there's no spread in the oven. I use it on convection. It's all sort of just, hit and miss in experience, but I use her basic recipe. I've added a little more flour to prevent the cookie from spreading. Her ratio of flour to butter is quite high with the butter. So the more butter, the more spreading is going to go on. So I've corrected that with a 1/2 cup of extra flour. But yes, I will include that.
That'd be great. That would be great. Everyone loved this session today.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Absolutely delightful. And I'm sure everyone is just drooling for a cookie right now. They're so
Right.
beautiful and look so good. So does anyone
Thank
else
you.
have any more questions before we finish off? Yes, Elise? Unmute?
Will this be available to watch again?
Yes, I have recorded it and I will put it on our website. And when I send everyone the recipes, I can include the link for the recording.
This was wonderful.
Oh, thanks, Elise. And you know what? I'm going to also include some other resources on there that you can go to online. Some people that I've learned from, starting with like the basic to the most complicated, because I'm really not even that complicated. I mean, there's people who are artists and that cookies their canvas really, truly, who do florals and make these fancy things. And, I'll give like the names of these people who really take you through the basics very well, and you can, and very slowly, and really can be helpful if you want to start doing this for yourself or friends or family or selling them or anything, So I hope everybody, came away with like appreciating what goes into a cookie. It's quite a bit of time to do each of these, into the process of letting it dry and the next step. So anyway,
It was
yes.
beautiful, very artistic. And yes, it's amazing how much detail and everything you've got going on there. It's
I
beautiful.
know.
And Susan Kempinen says, thank you so much, Rachel. What a sweet treat to have you. So
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else did too. And
and
I'm
this
happy.
will be, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew this is going to be available on our website, so you can watch again. And also when I send out the email that you're going to forward to me for
Mhm.
the recipes, make sure that you have your link for your website and how to contact you in case they would like to
Yeah.
contact you for some cookies.
Right. And just, if anybody does, it's, I like to have as much notice as possible to plan. And yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We had a great time. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.